All right, where we last left off, we had Dr. Hellion about to open a door to this elevator where she was saying what was going on all these different floors. She says, "Watch carefully. There's so much to see. Elevator commence." "Level 1, the elevator reported a moment later. As the elevator fell, Piper kept a keen eye on the glass elevator window. Then through the large glass walls of the first level saw scientists hunched over telescopes and other pieces of equipment that Piper couldn't even begin to imagine the use of, let alone put a name to. Level 2, entry granted. Horticultural specimens. Minimum security protocols in effect, the computer reported. A moment later, Piper caught glimpses of laboratories filled with exotic plants, arboretums with vast rows of shrubs and trees, and facility staff carefully tending to and monitoring to it all. One particular scientist caught Piper's eye as he leaned forward to smell an exceptionally beautiful rose. Suddenly, the rose's petals pulled back to reveal a mouth with sharp, thorn-like teeth. The rose fiercely lunged forward and bit onto the scientist's nose. Although she wasn't able to hear, Piper could see the poor scientist yowl in pain. "Look there," she pointed for Dr. Hellion to see, but the elevator dropped down another flight. "We have special task forces that carefully monitor the globe to identify and locate any species that require our assistance and protection. That way we can ensure its safety and, in the cases of some of these life forms, the safety of the rest of the world," Dr. Hellion continued. Piper watched as scientists gathered around a large insect. The insect suddenly gave itself a mighty shake and unraveled wide wings from beneath its many legs. Its wingspan was extraordinary, perhaps 5 feet, and adorned with incredible patterns. The patterns started to move and change hypnotically, and the scientists were beginning to fall asleep. Even Piper began to sway back and forth. "Amazing!" Piper shook herself awake. The entire facility had been created as a smart building, meaning that it has sensors that can detect and answer your needs. The computer voice can assist you with a lot of things, including giving you access to a wide variety of information. Unexpectedly, the elevator came to a stop and research assistant embarked. Holding a glass specimen cage that housed a tiny black cricket, Piper moved closer and the cricket stood up on the back 2 legs and looked right at her. Intrigued, Piper leaned inward. It was the cutest cricket she had ever seen, and he was just as interested as her as she was in him. He moved to the side of his cage next to her and even took one of his tiny legs and put it up against the glass. Piper was entranced. This was like no other cricket she had ever set eyes on, and she could have sworn he was sizing her up too. The spell was broken when the elevator stopped and the cricket and his handler disembarked. Unlike the other levels, the windows on the 4th floor were frosted over, so it wasn't possible to see inside. "Will I get to know about all these other things I'm seeing?" Piper wanted to see and touch everything. "That might be difficult. Many of them are dangerous, and most of them are being carefully studied. Unless we know all about them, it's not safe to risk your welfare or theirs." Piper was clearly disappointed by this answer, and Dr. Hellion relented, adding, "Why don't we see how things go, and based upon your progress, perhaps certain exceptions can be made." Piper grinned. Maybe she wouldn't need to travel around the world after all. It seemed like everything else she was looking for was right there under one roof. There wasn't a place Piper could set her eyes where a startling and amazing thing wasn't happening. She caught glimpses of a fish that had fur like a leopard, a snake with wings, and something that looked suspiciously like a unicorn. Level 13, humanoid life forms, maximum security personnel only. The elevator had dropped to the very bottom of the well and could travel no farther when the doors swished open. "Welcome to your new home, Piper." Piper's feet found their way onto the highly polished stone floor, and she looked about in wonder. The 13th level had 3 tiers, each with a balcony that overlooked the atrium where Piper was standing. A magnificent fountain dominated the atrium, and unusual plants and trees created a sense of division between small sitting areas and tables. They looked exactly the way Piper would have imagined a very grand hotel. It was all very clean and quiet, but also empty. "Where is everyone?" "The residents are currently busy. Why don't I show you around and then you can join them?" Piper nodded excitedly and followed Dr. Hellion on a tour down brightly lit halls. Past a huge library through a gymnasium equipped with everything from a swimming pool to a trampoline, rooms that Dr. Hellion called learning centers, spacious lounges, a science center, playrooms with brightly colored toy trunks, and finally a gourmet kitchen where the aroma of fresh baked cookies made Piper's mouth water. In the housekeeping quarters, a seamstress was on hand to expertly sew together a uniform that would fit Piper's exact measurements. Dr. Hellion allowed Piper to select from a huge wall filled with fabric bolts of every color. Didn't take Piper long before her eye was caught by a beautiful sky blue material made of the softest cotton. Before she knew it, she was standing before a large mirror in her uniform, which consisted of a full skirted sky blue dress with a white collar and white knee socks. In addition to this, her wild tangle of brown hair was liberated from the two tightly woven braids and held back by a blue ribbon. The whole getup was very dainty and feminine, and for a girl accustomed to overalls with multiple patches and church dresses that had serviced generations of McLeods, Piper felt a mite conspicuous as well as a bit gawky. While it's necessary to have uniforms, we like to honor each student's individuality by allowing them to choose their own material and color, Dr. Hellion pointed out as she walked with Piper to introduce her to the class. This is a mite tight around the arms. Piper moved her arms about, noticing how the dress was snugly fitted about her shoulders. Can I use my old clothes to fly in? That's a great question, Dr. Hellion paused, turning seriously to Piper. You know, Piper, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your flying. What about my flying? Our agents interviewed many of the people in Lowland County who were at the baseball game and saw you fly. Dr. Hellion began carefully. Do you know what they said about your flying? Piper shook her head. They said that it scared them. Some of them said that they didn't want someone flying around them, that it was dangerous and a threat to their safety. One girl, I think her name was Sally Sue Miller, said that she would never want to be friends with someone who could fly because she can't fly and it would make her sad to be around someone who could. She said that? Piper's face went hot with embarrassment. Dr. Hellion nodded. What do you think about that? Piper shrugged, too upset to respond. She tried to blink away the tears that were welling in her eyes. Piper, I care about your well-being. I want you to be happy and joyful, but I wonder if flying is really bringing true happiness into your life. But I love to fly more than anything, Piper protested. Of course, I'm not suggesting that you don't. I'm asking that you to think about your life as a whole, about your parents, about your community, and about other people. Do you think flying is a good thing for them? I guess I never thought about it that way before. Piper suddenly realized that things were more difficult and complicated. Maybe she was hurting her parents, and she certainly didn't want to do that. Maybe all the folks in Lowland County had a point. Piper, I know that you are a very sensitive and caring girl. I also know that you'd never do anything to knowingly hurt anyone. Dr. Hellion paused, looking at Piper with deep kindness in her eyes. Sometimes we have to make hard choices, though, and consider all perspectives and other people's feelings too. Sometimes our true happiness comes from creating a balance between what we like and what's in the best interest of others, and that's called being a grown-up. What Dr. Hellion said made a lot of sense to Piper. She'd never liked deceiving her parents and flying on the sky. The urge to fly was just so overpoweringly strong and got the better of her. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Of course not, and I know that, Dr. Hellion put an arm around Piper's shoulder, comforting her. Sometimes it's hard to figure things out on our own and we need help. That's only natural. Dr. Hellion walked forward, gently guiding Piper next to her. While you think about all that, and also for your safety as well as the rest of the class, I'd like you to consider staying on the ground. Would you be willing to do that? You mean not fly? Startled, Piper looked at Dr. Hellion. Just for now. Perhaps in a little bit we can talk about it more and see, okay? The last thing Piper wanted to do was promise not to fly, but Dr. Hellion was so smart and had so many good points. Not to mention the fact that she'd been so kind to Piper, she didn't want to be ungrateful. Well, I guess if you think it's for the best. I do, Dr. Hellion smiled. That's my girl. That's where chapter 7 begins.